And I'm Michelle, and we're best friends. Today we're continuing our series on the history and cultural impact of the body positivity movement through the decades. You can check out our first video in our series from January in the link below. Or above.
Or wherever it ends up.
Wherever it ends up. We post a new video in this series the last Tuesday of every month. But we also post all the other Tuesdays and Fridays.
Yeah.
With other fun stuff.
This week's video, we are talking about the first wave of the body positivity movement. So we last time talked about the Victorian dress reform movement from the 1880s that laid the groundwork for everything that could happen. Obviously, if you know anything about history, a few things happened in between then, and now we are talking about the 60s. Body positivity movement, as we know it today, got its official start in the 1960s with what was called the fat acceptance movement. It also went by different things such as fat pride, fat empowerment, and fat acceptance. I've already said fat acceptance. Fat activism. Fat activism. Why can't I say that?
That's a tongue twister.
Mm-hmm. Fat activism. It was a social movement that was looking to basically just get rid of the stigma around being fat. At this point in time and throughout history, being fat was seen as being a community problem. Not because people were worried about you as a person and your health, but because they were angry at you for not being able to contribute to the community as much.
Oh.
You weren't able to work as hard in the fields. You weren't able to work as long hours. You weren't able to walk as far. You weren't able to carry as much. A stigma against being fat really started at the community level.
Oh.
The fat acceptance movement of the 1960s was not cohesive. It was a lot of individual instances of things happening, often that were spur of the moment. They weren't planned. So in 1967, there was what they called a fat in that happened at Central Park in New York City against anti-fat bias. Now, this is coming off of the heels of sit-ins of the civil rights movement, and it was the same idea. It was a sit-in, but for fat people. In reality, the sit-in sounded like a lot of fun. It was people, about 500 people, sitting in New York Central Park, eating, carrying signs, burning diet books, and showing pictures of Sophia Loren, who at the time was considered a fat activist. She was considered fat by the standards of the 1960s.
Sophia Loren.
Yes, Sophia Loren.
Sophia Loren.
Yes, Sophia Loren. She was considered a fat activist and was very well regarded by people who were part of the fat acceptance movement because of what she had done for fat people in society, even though she was nowhere near fat. But because she was bigger than the stick figures that were in media and portrayed at that time, she accepted that role as well. She was considered by the people to be a fat actress, and she accepted that role and did what she could for the community.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Like I said, lots of things happened that were not planned. The fat in was in 1967. The next sort of big unplanned thing was in 1979, where the term BBW was created.
Oh.
If you don't know, BBW stands for Big Beautiful Woman. The term BBW does today have different, sometimes derogatory connotations attached to that phrase, but it was created in 1979 by a woman named Carol Shaw to celebrate the bodies of plus-size women. The fat acceptance movement was created more specifically for fat women, but fat men were also encouraged to be part of the movement. Fat men face many of the same issues in society that fat women do, just not to the same extremes. Fat men do have the media showing them the body that they should have, but it's not to the same extent that fat women are inundated, or just women in general are inundated with what the perfect female body should look like. Which we all know the problem with that is that it changes every 5 to 10 years. If you look back to the Victorian dress movement, the ideal women's body shape was an S. And then if you go to the 90s, the ideal women's body shape was heroin chic. And then if you move forward to the 2010s, it was big booty like Kim K.
Yeah.
Like, it's constantly changing, and no one body will ever fit all of the standards, which is where the body positivity movement came from. That's not to say, though, that there haven't been problems with it. There was a movement started in the early 1970s called the National Association for the Advancement of Fat Acceptance, NAAFA. It is hard to say, so we're going to use NAFA from now on. Whether right or wrong, NAFA opposes dieting and any sort of weight loss. That is where one of the critics of the fat acceptance and further body positivity movement comes. Many doctors and healthcare professionals recognize the importance of having a healthy body weight in order for your body to be at its peak health. In this case, the fat acceptance movement was against that. So there are many critics of the fat acceptance movement because of that, and I can understand where they're coming from. I think the good thing about the way the fat acceptance movement and body positivity has evolved is that a lot of people are now not looking at it as fat is great, everyone should be fat, but in the 60s and the 70s, when this was all starting, that's how they were approaching it.
Okay.
There were even some people who were like, more people should be fat, everyone should be fat, fat is better than skinny, and that's where the movement started, but it's not necessarily where it needs to be today. To their credit, NAFA does say that while they oppose going to extremes to conform and fit into society's expectation of bodies, they are not against people being healthy. They do say they want people to be healthy, they just don't want them to follow extreme diets. They're also, at this time, opposed to weight loss surgery, which I know a few people who have had weight loss surgery, and that can be a fabulous tool for helping to get your health in order. It's not a quick fix, which is, I think, at this time, what a lot of people thought weight loss surgery was. Even today, I'm sure people think that. But it's a tool that can be used for people who are struggling with their weight and need to get healthier. One of the further criticisms of the fat acceptance movement in the 60s and 70s is that it was completely lacking in diversity. The fat acceptance movements are dominated by middle-class white women. There's not a lot of representation by men in the group. There's not a lot of representation of people of color in the group, people with disabilities, anything that would not be a white woman, basically. And that has been one of the big criticisms of the movement. Another part of it, too, is that there's been a lot of division between whether or not people who are morbidly obese should be considered disabled. At this point, I am considered morbidly obese based on the BMI, body mass index scale. But even my doctor has said the BMI is he didn't say that he didn't say that it's garbage, but he implied that it's, again, a tool that does not necessarily represent exactly what the health of your body is. So based on BMI, I'm morbidly obese and I'm not disabled. But some people who are morbidly obese are disabled because of their weight. And so there has been division within the community as well about whether or not being morbidly obese should be a classification for disability. At this time, during the first wave, most of the media criticism about the fat acceptance movement was along the lines of health. There is a considerable amount of evidence that shows that being obese does come with many other health risks, and it does increase your chances of either being very ill or dying from different diseases that people who are in a healthy weight range aren't as likely to experience. It was this time in the 1960s and 70s when doctors discovered that a significant weight loss, so of 10% of your body weight or more, would help to reduce your risk of things like heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and other weight-related illnesses. Because doctors were discovering that at the same time as the fat acceptance movement was happening, a lot of the media critique around the fat acceptance movement focused on the health of people who are obese and deciding for them whether or not they were healthy. Some doctors, though, do actually recognize the fact that even though losing weight is a good tool to help keep health in check, it's not the be all and end all. Many people who lose weight because of the way bodies are composed regain their weight, and it has nothing to do with them not trying to be healthy, and it has everything to do with the fact that once your body hits a certain weight, it is always trying to maintain that weight because it thinks that that's what we need to survive. Most of us have ancestors who were peasants, and storing fat was important for them. And now, hundreds of years later, our bodies do not need to store fat because for the most part, we have heated homes in the winter. We have enough food to sustain us, or the ability to access food to sustain us. And so our bodies need to do something different than what they did hundreds of years ago, but they haven't evolved that way.
Right.
Barry Franklin, who's the director of cardio at a rehab facility, has discussed the fat acceptance movement in this time. And what he has said is something that I would agree with, in that a social movement that implies that no matter what size you are healthy is a bit misleading. What is also true, though, is if you put two people side by side, one who's morbidly obese and one who is naturally thin, you can't tell which one is healthier than the other just by looking at them.
Yeah.
And so a lot of doctors are, specifically at this time, are against the fat acceptance movement because of the perception of health based on size. But there were also a few doctors who were able to actually look at the research or do research of their own and come to the conclusion that size does not equal health. Some doctors did also recognize at this time that there were a lot of diets coming out that were not healthy. Maybe you lost weight, but that was not a healthy way to lose weight. And so this is the beginning, really. This is the first wave of the body positivity movement in what was at that time called fat acceptance. And it was the beginning of the push and pull between doctors of fat is not healthy, just being fat means you're very unhealthy, to fat can be healthy, but you would be better off if you weighed a little less. And so there's the beginnings of the push and pull that we're going to explore even more over the next few episodes.
Thanks so much for watching. Let us know what surprised you the most about the body positivity movement in the Western world. Like our video, subscribe to our channel, and you can also follow us on Instagram, where you'll see even more of our lovely faces. We'll see you next time. Bye!